Hello and welcome, I'm Ellie Richardson and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. US President Donald Trump hopes Ukraine reaches a deal with Russia fast ahead of Washington-brokered talks in Geneva today. Trump is pushing to end the conflict, but two previous rounds of US-mediated talks in Abu Dhabi did not yield any signs of a breakthrough. Donald Trump said that he would be involved indirectly in high-stakes talks between Iran and the US over Tehran's nuclear program in Geneva, adding he believed Tehran wanted to make a deal. President Trump has said Cuba was a failed nation and called on Havana to make a deal. Washington is in talks with Cuba's highest people just days after he threatened the island's struggling economy with what he described as a virtual oil blockade. New Mexico lawmakers passed legislation to launch what they said was the first full investigation into what happened on Zorro Ranch, where the late US sex offender Jeffrey Epstein is accused of trafficking and sexually assaulting girls and women. A bipartisan committee will seek testimony from survivors of alleged sexual abuse at the ranch, located about 30 miles south of Santa Fe. French President Emmanuel Macron begins a three-day visit to India with talks focused on artificial intelligence cooperation and a potential multi-billion-dollar Dassault Rafale fighter jet deal. 3 people, including the suspect, were fatally shot during a Rhode Island youth hockey game. Pawtucket Police Chief Tina Conclaves told reporters that 3 other victims were hospitalized in critical condition. The shooter died from an apparent self-inflicted gun wound. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said on Tuesday his government would not help Australians in a Syrian camp holding families of suspected Islamic State militants return home, with the government open to prosecutions if they make it back. Ireland's Data Protection Commission, DPC, said it has opened a formal investigation into X's AI chatbot Grok over the processing of personal data and its potential to produce harmful sexualized images and videos, including of children. India is hosting the highly anticipated AI Impact Summit at the Bharat Mandapam in New Delhi. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will inaugurate the summit this evening, kicking off a transformative conversation on artificial intelligence. The summit, which will run until February the 20th, brings together global leaders, innovators and policymakers, including French President Emmanuel Macron, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva, and Brazilian President Luiz Inaciano Lula da Silva, to explore AI's potential in shaping the future. The summit's theme reflects India's commitment to using AI for the greater good, striving for welfare and happiness for all. Attendees will experience live demonstrations and exhibits from 300 pavilions, featuring contributions from 13 countries, including the United Kingdom, Japan, Russia and Australia. With over 7,000 square meters of space, the summit provides a platform for collaborations among businesses, startups, state governments and research institutions. Additionally, international delegates will engage in discussions about exploring new opportunities within the global AI ecosystem. Meanwhile, Estonia President Alar Karis has arrived in Delhi to participate in the India AI Impact Summit. Indian Union Minister of State for Youth Affairs and Sports Raksha Kadis welcomed him at the airport. His visit is aimed at strengthening bilateral ties, specifically in digital governance, AI innovation, cybersecurity, and innovation. As part of the AI Impact Summit 2026, a series of high-level bilateral meetings are scheduled. Today, dignitaries will meet starting with Spain's President Pedro Sanchez, followed by Finland's Prime Minister Antti Petri Orpo and Serbia's President Alexander Vučić. At meetings continue throughout the day, with Croatia's Prime Minister Andrej Plenković, Estonia's President Alar, Bhutan's Prime Minister Dasho Trising, and Kazakhstan's Prime Minister Olzaz Pektov. And on Thursday, the 19th February, discussions with key leaders are to be continued, including Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince Sheikh Khalid bin Mohammed bin Zayed, the Netherlands Prime Minister Dick Schoof, Switzerland's President Guy Parmelin, and Greece's Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis. The meetings wrap up on Friday, 20th February, with leaders from Liechtenstein, Slovakia, Sri Lanka, the United Nations, and Mauritius. And for your top stories this hour, India has seized 3 oil tankers linked to Iran and sanctioned by the US. The vessels, Stilab Ruby, Asphalt Star, and Al Jafia, were intercepted off Mumbai's coast after suspicious activities were detected. These tankers were reportedly changing identities to evade law enforcement. India is increasing maritime surveillance to prevent illicit ship-to-ship oil transfers, often used to bypass sanctions. While Iranian officials deny any connection to the tankers, US records show that they are linked to Iranian oil. The seizures come amid improving US-India ties, with Washington recently reducing tariffs on Indian goods. India now has around 55 ships and 10 to 12 aircraft monitoring its waters. We are now being joined by Major General Sudhakar Ji, who's a senior geopolitical and strategic defence expert, joining us from Jaipur. Thank you for joining us here today on NewsX World. What methods, like changing ship identities to ship transfers, are suspected to be used to evade sanctions, and why are those practices a concern for maritime security?
Morning, Ellie. Well, thank you for inviting me for your show. First and foremost thing is that whenever any ship is sanctioned unilaterally by any country in the world, it does not get testified or doesn't stand the scrutiny of law of the International Court of Justice and the affiliated organization. But be that as it may, we all know that might is right, and we keep learning from the old usages of the Greek philosopher Thucydides. What he said is that the strong will do what it can, the weak will suffer what it must. What it means is that the superpower is superpower. If they have imposed sanction, well, then it demands the neighboring countries or at least close allies to support for achievement of the mission-oriented objective. But be that as it may, India and USA have not had very good relations in past couple of months, but there has been turn of event. The trade deal has come through, although there are a lot of caveats and gaps to be plugged. There are clear indications of normalization as of now. How far it will go, time will tell. But the fact of the matter remains that Iran, being where it is geographically, it is part of Asia, and anything that happens in Iran will have direct and indirect impact on India, because the sea lanes of communication passes from Persian Gulf through Strait of Hormuz then the Sea of Oman, through the Arabian Sea, Indian Ocean region, and through Malacca Strait to South China Sea. Now, India's export is around 95% that passes through maritime routes, 55% through South China Sea, around 45% through this route. But most importantly, we have had very ugly experience of 26/11, attack on Taj Hotel in Mumbai, and to eradicate such kind of turn of events against the national security, India has to take proactive action, and hence the response matrix entails effective surveillance, monitoring, and also seizing such kind of activities by the vessels of unknown identity, which have reportedly been sanctioned by the United States. It is simply to actually give effective countermeasures against any untoward eventuality or activity that may unfold along its coastline and in the mainland. Back to you, Lee.
And Iran has denied links to the seized tankers. How might such denials affect diplomatic tensions between India, Iran, and the US?
Very brilliant question. I must compliment you. It's the geopolitics is in a churn. It does. No matter what people say, it does. Because at one point in time in 2007, our dependence on Iran for import of oil was close to a little more than 17% of the total import by India. I'm talking about the fossil fuel. Because of pressure by United States, we had no option, India had no option, but to bring it down to zero by 2017. So this is the first and foremost thing, that our energy security takes a beating, although we have been restructuring our architecture, diversifying so as to import more oil from other countries, including United States and Venezuela. That we'll see how it happens. But the point which you are asking, it definitely does not augur well for healthy and constructive relationship between India and Iran. It definitely puts India in a back foot as far as our alliances and our cooperation is concerned, because the Chabahar port, on which India has spent billions of dollars, has already been sanctioned by USA. We can no longer operate it, and I only hope and pray that the United States understands the meaning and the objectivity of Chabahar port. It was meant to counter effectively the Gwadar port, which has been leased to China by Pakistan. That is one part. Now coming to the second issue which you raised, it's a very important issue, relationship between India and the US. Whether we like it or not, India is looking at a long-term objective of 30 trillion US dollar or more GDP by 2047 or earlier than that. If that has to be achieved as a long-term objective, then India is left with no option but to have access into the market of United States. It is as much required as USA requires the 570 million middle class population, or people with the buying capacity of more than $12 a day. So therefore it brings us to a state wherein we are expected, India is expected to navigate this complexity with a little softer approach, not with the hardened strategic autonomy which is being articulated from time to time. We need to calibrate, soften our approach at times, and at times we need to harden it so as to protect our national interest. Back to you, Ali.
Thank you, Major General Stakji, but don't go too far, as we will be back with you very shortly. New Mexico lawmakers have passed legislation to launch a comprehensive investigation into Jeffrey Epstein's Zuro Ranch, where he's accused of trafficking and sexually assaulting girls and women. The bipartisan committee, known as the Truth Commission, aims to identify individuals who may have known about or participated in the abuse. The $2.5 million investigation, which has subpoena power, is set to begin on Tuesday, with interim findings expected in July. This investigation follows Epstein's death in 2019 and comes after the release of new files shedding light on his ties to influential figures, including former New Mexico's governors. Let's listen in to what New Mexico State Representative and Commission legislation co-sponsor Andrea Romero had to say.
And so to think that this was happening for decades, that this predator was preying upon women, people in our community, is not only terrifying, it's just abhorrent that we couldn't turn every stone over at the time that he could be held accountable. And so for any sense of justice to be had, we have to tell the truth. We have to tell the story of what happened here.
We are now being joined again back by Major General Stakhaji. Thank you for joining us back here today. What gaps or failures in earlier investigations, federal or state, does this new Truth Commission seek to address?
You mean to say about the Epstein file or something else you have in mind?
About the going into the Zuro Ranch linking to the Epstein files.
Okay. The gaps, we need to understand the federal structure of United States of America, and Epstein being what it has turned out to be the epicenter of immoral, unethical activity, and it is creating very unexpected ripples all over the world. It's gone beyond the boundary of USA. Now, within USA, it needs to be understood that there is a distinction between the state. The provinces have a certain power, and the center has got certain power. And when you talk about the distinction between the two, there are certain issues which have to be followed up and strictly enforced by the state administration. But there are certain issues where the center has to actually seize the opportunity and go in for executive orders to impose some countermeasures. Otherwise, the national security matters related to defense, finance, and foreign policy will be impacted. So under these thumb rule guidelines, whichever and whenever any issue that actually impinges on these three dimensions. Now the technology is taking a kind of overriding importance. The critical minerals are also taking, so as the scientific innovations, and likewise, every time when it is passing by to a future roadmap, there will be new issues which will come up. As long as the overall national security is protected and addressed in an effective manner, I think my take is that it should be a rightful solution to any kind of challenge. And that includes the Epstein file issue as well.
Mm. And what kind of evidence and testimonies will the Commission be looking for exactly? And how might survivor accounts shape the findings?
Well, so far there are millions of photos and emails and files which have already been released, and I am given to understand through informal sources that there are many more which are yet to be released by the Department of Justice. When I say this, I am mindful of the fact that many high officials and also high dignitaries, not only in USA, also outside USA, have been indicated to be involved in some form or the other. Now, when you talk about the evidence, the legal scrutiny will always demand substantive kind of evidence to prove the culpability or the involvement of an individual, because here the character of an individual is under stake, and it is something like character assassination. It amounts to defamation of an individual. So when you start actually dealing with such kind of subjects, the justice not only has to be meted out, but it has to be meted out in a very objective manner. For that, one requires very, very tangible, substantive and objective evidence highlighting the involvement of the accused. Otherwise, in the court of law, it may fall flat and they may take recourse to defamation of their personality and the character. Back to you, Ellie.
Thank you so much, Major General Stakhaji, for joining us here today on NewsX World. It's a pleasure speaking with you. President Donald Trump has recently confirmed that the United States and Cuba are currently in talks amid Cuba's severe fuel shortage caused by a White House-imposed oil blockade. Trump stated that Cuba is facing dire conditions and is struggling to maintain essential services like air travel and medical care. The US has restricted trade with Cuba due to its ties with Iran, Russia and China. According to reports, Cuba is facing immense challenges, with multiple flight suspensions and international aid being sent to support the island's needs.
Cuba is right now a failed nation. They don't even have jet fuel to get for airplanes to take off. They're clogging up their runway. We're talking to Cuba right now. They have Marco Rubio talking to Cuba right now. That they should absolutely make a deal because it's really a humanitarian threat. We'll see how it all turns out, but Cuba and us, we are talking. In the meantime, there's an embargo. There's no oil, there's no money, there's no anything.
If a deal isn't made, would you consider an operation like the one in Venezuela?
I don't want to answer that. Why would I answer that? If I was, it wouldn't be a very tough operation, as you could figure. But I don't think that'll be necessary.
We are now being joined by Ambassador Vishwanathan, who is a Latin American expert and former ambassador to Venezuela, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you for joining us here today on NewsX World. What might be the broader diplomatic consequences for the US relations in Latin America if Washington continues its pressure campaign against Havana and causing them so many disruptions, and now they're relying on humanitarian aid from other countries?
Well, Trump is talking nonsense when he says Cuba is a failed state. The culprit for this is he himself and the United States. They have been imposing these illegal sanctions for the last 70 years on Cuba. Every year, United Nations passes a resolution asking the United States to remove these illegal sanctions. Imagine, suppose the Chinese impose sanctions on United States. The Americans will not be able to celebrate Christmas or have fireworks on 4th of July because 90% of the Christmas decorations and fireworks come from China. Now, Cuba in this kind of catastrophe because of these illegal American sanctions. If they stop that, then Cuba will become a normal country. They can do business with other countries.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Vishwanathan, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Social media platform X was briefly down for several users globally, with thousands of users reporting disruptions in loading app and accessing feed. Several users reported technical errors in loading feed, failed search results and accessing the social media app. The internet users reported error messages while accessing. According to reports, the services resumed in the social media site an hour after the outage. There wasn't an immediate confirmation from X on the outage, nor was there any update on the reason behind it. That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.